Hi, this is Patrick. Thank you for tuning in to the second episode for the demo of Siege of Verdan. This one I'm going to focus on card playing and movement. I'm just going to brush on card playing and focus more on movement. My first video also tapped on card playing. You'll take notice here that I've already got some cards laid out from the first video. You may recognize the cards in some of these tokens. I have my ruler card out in the leader position. I've got my capital city out. My tokens are all displayed. In the first episode, I told you how to lay out your leader and your capital city. You place your capital, obviously you put your capital city first. All the other players would be putting their capital city down next. Then on my turn, I place my ruler down on my capital city. That's where it has to go. And then I'll proceed to playing cards. Now, you can't really see too well on my board here, but my turn phases start as empty resource pool. That means all your resources are reduced to 0. The next one is collect resources. Now I only have control of one state. That's this guy right here. My ruler and my capital city are both on that state, which means I gain 3 resources. I reap 3 resources for this turn. So the next part would be pay maintenance fees. I do have a card that looks like it has a maintenance fee, but when you have a ruler in the leader position, now that's the one that's not in the rack, that's actually in the leader position for the game, you don't have to pay his maintenance costs. So you have your ruler in your leader position, no maintenance. I have 3 resource points. I move on to the next part, which is playing cards. Take a look at my hand. My hand is 7 cards. I covered that on the first episode as well. You're dealt out 7 cards. I'm going to have 3 resource points to play. Each one of these cards has an initial cost. And I'm going to focus on these 2. My initial cost on my scout is 1. My initial cost on my light infantry is also 1. So I'm only going to spend 2 resource points this turn. I'm going to have an extra resource point. And I'll cover another segment of this. We'll cover negotiation, give you something to do with that extra resource point. But I'm going to take my scout, pay my 1 resource point, put it in the first slot of my card holder. Then I'm going to pay the second resource point, and that's going to be my light infantry. I'm going to place that in the second slot of my card holder. So I've played my cards. I'm going to have 1 resource points left over I'm not paying for. I'm going to move on to the next phase. The next phase is movement, which is what I'm going to focus on this tutorial. So, cards in the first slot, I take my token marked number 1. And place that. It has to be placed on a state that you control. My number 1 and my number 2 both go on the only state that I control. Movement starts. I'm going to start my movement with my leader. Normally people don't like to move their leader around too much. It draws a lot of attention. The leader can really do some, if your leader gets killed, you can get some damage done to you. But in the first round, usually people start far enough away where it's not an issue. You may want to think that through if somebody starts kind of closer. But I'm going to start this one with my leader. My leader, obviously, like I said in the last episode, is a little crown, token with a little crown on it. Now my leader has a movement of 1, an MV of 1. In fact, let me go over what exactly all these things mean on the card. Unique individual ruler, that tells you the card type. MV is movement value, how many black lines he can cross. IC is initial cost. CV, combat value, is 2. MC is a maintenance cost. That's 1. And if he's a flag carrier, that means I get to drop a control token every time he moves. So I'm going to move my ruler from the 1 state that I control to 1 spot to the left. Now he's a flag carrier, so that means I get to drop a flag token. So now I'm in control of that state. The next one I'm going to move, is the Scout. Now the Scout has a movement value of 3. That's my number 1 slot on my card holder. And I'm going to move him 3 spots, or her 3 spots. So I'm going to move 1, 2, 3. I'm trying to maximize my movement so my next turn I get more resources. So I get to drop a control token there, there, and where the Scout currently is, here. Last but not least, I'm going to move my light infantry. My light infantry has a movement value of 2. So, designated as a number 2, I'm going to move him 2 spots. 1, 2. And again, I get to drop a control token for every place that he's at. Now, on one turn, I've captured an entire country, which will give me some bonuses, and we'll discuss that later when I go back over resource pools. But for right now, I've covered movement pretty well. The only thing I'd like to stress with movement is sometimes you're going to go up against another player and move through a state that he or she is in. And I'll cover this again in combat, but I'm going to give you a real brief demonstration. Now let's say the light infantry belonged to someone else, and the Scout belonged to me. I'm going to move them up into the green area. Let's say the Scout is number 1 still, and the light infantry is the number 2. It's my turn. I want to move the Scout through this state to get to this state. Now, one of the issues with that is that I have to go through the state with the light infantry. So I'll move it 1. Now you've got to stop your movement phase and discover what that number 2 is. So as I move from this state to this state, I'll find out what that other chippy is in there. So we'll exchange information. I will show my opponent my Scout, and he will show me his light infantry. Now, because they're both military units, I have to stop there. I cannot move through that state. My movement turn for that one particular card stops. This doesn't apply to every single card. There are lots of cards that are not military units. These two just happen to be. Merchants, for example. Here's a merchant card. It's an individual merchant, which means I do not have to stop. But all military units have to stop once they move through a state occupied by another military unit. And there's only one way to find out if it's a military unit or not, is actually to move through the state. All right, now next episode I'm going to be covering declaring attacks, and I am going to go over that again. But please stay tuned for the next video. Thanks.